This is the video that finishes the syllabus. Everything we haven't covered yet across this whole series: partnerships changing shape, the ethics every accountant is bound by, auditing, and who's actually responsible for a company's accounts, and computerized systems, sits here in 4 topics. 2 of these, ethics and auditing, aren't calculation topics, they're judgment topics. And Cambridge examiners have found again and again that judgment topics are where well-prepared candidates quietly lose the most marks. Not because they don't know the theory, but because they answer it generically instead of applying it to the actual scenario in front of them. So these get the same full treatment as every calculation topic in this series. The concept taught properly, the mistake examiners keep documenting, and a full exam-level question solved and explained step by step. Let's start with a partnership that's about to change shape. A partnership doesn't have to dissolve to change shape. A new partner joins, an existing partner retires, the profit share ratio is renegotiated. Each of these moves real value between the partners, and every one of them runs through the same 2 accounts. A revaluation account for any asset now worth something different from its book value, and the partners' capital accounts for goodwill and every other adjustment. Here's the first documented finding. The revaluation account itself comes out confused. Candidates lose track of exactly which asset is being revalued, and the capital account structure and goodwill treatment that should sit alongside it are unfamiliar, despite this being frequently examined. Here's the second, and it's the single most reliable place to lose marks in this whole topic: an asset personally taken over by an outgoing partner. It gets omitted from the realization account entirely or entered at the wrong value. The sale price used instead of the agreed takeover value, or the reverse. Here's the third: working out how much a continuing partner must introduce or withdraw to hit a new agreed capital target. Examiners have found many candidates clearly unable to know where to start, a large minority not attempting it at all. Here is your exam-level question. Boateng, Owusu, and Darko share profits 3-2-1. Darko retires, and the new ratio between Boateng and Owusu becomes 3-2. Goodwill is valued at $60,000, raised and then written off through the capital accounts. No permanent goodwill account is kept. Darko personally takes over a motor vehicle at an agreed value of $9,000 against its $12,000 carrying value. After Darko's retirement, Boateng and Owusu agree a new combined capital of $160,000, split in their new ratio. Calculate the effect of goodwill on each partner's capital account, the correct treatment of the motor vehicle, and exactly how much Boateng and Owusu must each introduce or withdraw to meet the new capital target. Pause the video and work through goodwill first before you touch the motor vehicle or the capital target. Here is the solution, and we'll take it one part at a time. First, goodwill. $60,000 is raised first in the old ratio, 3-2-1, crediting Boateng $30,000, Owusu $20,000, Darko $10,000. It's then written off immediately in the new ratio, 3-2, debiting Boateng $36,000 and Owusu $24,000. Net effect: Darko leaves with his $10,000 share of goodwill intact in his capital account. Boateng is $6,000 worse off overall. Owusu $4,000 worse off. The cost of goodwill shifts entirely onto the continuing partners in their new profit-sharing ratio. Second, the motor vehicle. It is not sold. It's taken over personally by Darko at the agreed value of $9,000, not its $12,000 carrying value, and not any other figure. The $3,000 shortfall between carrying value and agreed takeover value is a loss on revaluation, shared by all 3 partners in the old ratio before Darko's capital account is credited with the $9,000 he's taking the asset out at. Use the sale price instead of $9,000 and every figure downstream is wrong. Third, capital introduced. New combined capital is $160,000, split 3-2. Boateng $96,000, Owusu $64,000. Compare that to what's actually sitting in each partner's capital account after goodwill and the revaluation adjustments are posted. Whatever the shortfall is, each partner introduces in cash. Any surplus, they withdraw. That comparison target capital in the new ratio against actual capital after every other adjustment, is the entire calculation. It only looks hard because so many candidates never get as far as setting it up. An accountant's numbers are only worth trusting if the accountant preparing them can be trusted. That's the entire reason this topic exists on the syllabus, and it rests on 5 fundamental principles. Integrity, being straightforward and honest in all professional relationships. Objectivity, not letting bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence override professional judgment. Professional competence and due care, maintaining the knowledge and skill to perform competently and acting diligently. Confidentiality, respecting information gained professionally and not disclosing or using it without proper authority. And professional behavior, complying with relevant laws and regulations and avoiding anything that discredits the profession. 5 principles, and Cambridge doesn't test whether you can list them. It tests whether you can identify which ones are actually under threat in a specific situation and say why. Here is the finding, and it isn't unique to this topic. It shows up across this whole paper's discussion and advice questions. Answers come back generic rather than applied to the actual scenario given. A correct sounding definition of a principle recited on its own earns nothing if it never touches the specific facts in front of you. Here is your exam-level question. Kwabena is the accountant for Nyami Traders Limited. The finance director, Kwabena's brother-in-law, asks him to delay recording a $60,000 repairs invoice until after the year end so that profit clears the threshold for the director's annual bonus. Identify the 2 fundamental principles most under threat here and explain why using the details of this specific scenario. Pause it and name the actual scenario detail behind each principle before you write anything down. Here is the solution. Integrity is the first and most direct. Deliberately delaying a real invoice to change a reported profit figure is straightforwardly dishonest financial reporting, whatever the intention behind it. Objectivity is the second. The finance director is Kwabena's brother-in-law, and the request personally benefits that relative's bonus. A textbook self-interest and familiarity threat to Kwabena's ability to judge the request impartially. 2 principles, and the reason both earn marks here is that neither answer stops at the definition. Each one names the exact scenario detail that triggers it. That's the difference between a generic answer and an applied one on every judgment question this syllabus will ever ask you. 2 topics down, 2 to go. Notice what both of them tested underneath the arithmetic. Not whether you know a rule, but whether you can apply it to the specific facts in front of you. The specific asset one partner personally took over. The specific relationship threatening a specific principle. That's exactly the skill the next 2 topics test as well, just with less arithmetic and more judgment. Directors run a company, shareholders own it. An audit exists because those are 2 different groups of people, and shareholders need independent assurance that the directors' own account of their stewardship, the financial statements, can be relied on. Here is the first documented finding, and it's the same pattern seen across this syllabus's cost topics too. Candidates can state facts about external and internal audits separately, but can't frame them as an actual contrast when asked to. Here is the second, and it's a genuinely striking misconception found across several sessions. Some candidates state that the auditor prepares the financial statements. It's the opposite. The directors prepare them. The auditor examines them. Get this backwards, and the entire stewardship point, the syllabus, is testing collapses. Here is the third. Qualified versus unqualified audit reports, confused or underexplained, and true and fair view recited as a stock phrase, without candidates ever extending it into what compliance and the audit report actually mean. Here is your exam-level question. At RJ Manufacturing PLC, a director objects to internal audit, calling it paying twice for the same job alongside the external audit. Separately, the directors want the external auditor's report to confirm the financial statements are correct. Explain the actual difference between external and internal audit. Explain why correct is the wrong expectation of an audit report, and state who is actually responsible for the financial statements. Pause it and answer all three parts before you check the solution. Here is the solution. External audit is independent of the company, required by law, and reports to shareholders on whether the financial statements give a true and fair view. It is not the same job twice because internal audit is employed by the company itself, reports to management or the audit committee, and reviews internal controls and risk management, not the statutory financial statements. Second, an audit report never says the statements are correct. No audit gives absolute certainty, only reasonable assurance that they are free from material misstatement and give a true and fair view. And third, directly, the financial statements are the director's responsibility to prepare, not the auditor's. The auditor's job is to examine them independently. That responsibility is the entire stewardship relationship this topic is built around. This is a small topic on the syllabus, 2 bullet points worth, and honestly, it rarely carries an entire question on its own. Most likely, it shows up as one part bolted onto a bigger scenario. So it gets a short focused treatment here, not stretched to feel bigger than it is. What actually matters? Planning and cleaning the data before any transfer, choosing a cutover point from an agreed final manual trial balance, and safeguarding data integrity during the changeover itself. Independent second-person checking, retaining the original manual records as a fallback, restricting entry to authorized staff, and senior sign-off before the old system is retired. Here is the pattern from an adjacent discussion question on the same paper. Candidates name a safeguard correctly, 1 mark. But don't develop why or how it actually protects data integrity in the given scenario. The marks requiring that development are exactly the ones lost. Here is your exam-level question. R Limited is transferring its manual accounts to a computerized system. State 2 steps to take before the transfer, then explain 2 ways to ensure data integrity during the transfer itself, developed beyond simply naming them. Pause it and try developing each safeguard, not just naming it, before you continue. Here is the solution. Before transferring, agree a final manual trial balance as the cutover point and clean the data, correcting errors in the manual records first so they aren't carried into the new system. During the transfer, run the 2 systems in parallel for a period, comparing their outputs directly against each other to catch discrepancies before the manual system is retired. Naming parallel running alone earns 1 mark, but explaining that the comparison is what actually catches, the discrepancy is what earns the second. And independently, check the entered data against that final manual trial balance, using a second person separate from whoever keyed it in. The independence of that second check is what makes it a real safeguard, not just a repeat of the same mistake. 4 topics: partnerships changing shape, the ethics every accountant is bound by, auditing and stewardship, and computerized systems. And with them, this series is complete. Every AS and A2 topic on the Cambridge 9706 syllabus across 4 videos, each one built the same way. The concept taught properly, a mistake Cambridge's own examiners have actually documented, and a full exam-level question solved step by step. If there's one thread running through all of it across every video in this series, is this: examiners aren't usually failing you on whether you know the rule. They're failing you on whether you can apply it to the actual facts in front of you instead of reciting it in general. Do that consistently and you are ready for this syllabus. Search Cambridge Accounting on StudyRevise for the rest of the series, and thank you for learning with me.